Hey guys, and welcome to this week's episode of D3Live. So today we're going to be talking about a pretty big topic that I think is going to be on a lot of people's minds this year, which is a big tablet comparison between the iPad 2, the Motorola Xoom, and of course the Blackberry Playbook. Now, last year was definitely the year of the iPad. There's no question about it. Apple pretty much created a segment that was, just absolutely tiny and turned it into a phenomenon. I mean, you really, everywhere you look, people, just buying iPads, people are using iPads. iPad's a huge deal. However, this year, I'm not so sure it's going to be quite so simple, as there are a bunch of really good competitors, namely the Motorola Xoom as well as the Blackberry Playbook, in addition to a lot of others. However, today I'm just going to go ahead and focus on these three tablets. So to start out with, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the Blackberry Playbook. Now, I was able to go ahead and get a fairly extensive hands-on of this at CES this year, and I came away very impressed. The Blackberry Playbook is a really solid tablet. It's got a lot of really cool features. So some of the things that kind of stood out to me is that it has a 7-inch display. Now, this is not particularly revolutionary or anything, but when you consider it against the 9.7-inch display of the iPad and the 10.1-inch display of the Motorola Xoom, it definitely does make a difference. So a fair bit smaller. However, that's not really all that bad of a thing in my opinion. And you go ahead, it's a lot easier to move around. It's not quite so bulky. You can fit it in smaller bags, and a lot of time I kind of prefer the 7-inch form factor. Now, in addition to that, though, it still has the full tablet experience. It has a dual-core processor. We don't know exactly what it is, but we do know that it's really powerful. Indeed, actually, at CES, I was able to watch, I was able to use it. I opened up a 1080p video and ran a fairly graphically intense game at the same time, which is pretty awesome just for a laptop in general, much less a tablet. Some of the other cool things about the Playbook is that it has a 1080p rear-facing camera and a 720p front-facing camera. So overall, I'm really looking forward to the Blackberry Playbook. Now, we should be seeing it here in the next few months. It will be available on Sprint 4G. We'll be surprised if we see it on more carriers, as well as a Wi-Fi only, all that kind of stuff. But we do know that at the very least that it will be available with the Sprint 4G network. So the Blackberry Playbook is definitely one to keep your eye on this year. Now, moving on, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the Motorola Xoom. Again, this is another one of the tablets that was announced at CES, or rather, it was the only tablet, one of the only major tablets that was announced at CES. And I was also able to get a pretty good hands-on of this as well. Same story with the Playbook. I really do like the Motorola Xoom. It's got a lot of really cool features. One of the biggest ones in my mind is the fact that it does run Android 3.0 Honeycomb. Now, this, unlike what you might see in the Galaxy Tab, is a totally reworked version of Android that is made specifically for tablets. And the Xoom is going to be the first tablet to go ahead and use this operating system. So some of the cool things about Android 3.0 is that it just works really well on the nice large screen. No, I've just said this, but I really want to emphasize, if you ever saw the Galaxy Tab, you'll know that it's just the phone operating system, just kind of tweaked a little bit, pulled and stretched and everything just to work on a tablet. Whereas the Xoom is made 100%, and of course Honeycomb is made 100% to work on a tablet. This means that there are none of those little kind of compromises and kind of little just weird things that are going on. Everything should run really nicely and smoothly on the nice 10.1-inch display, which is incidentally a 720p display, so definitely should be a very nice screen. But moving on, also does have the NVIDIA Tegra 2 chipset. So this is a dual-core 1 GHz processor. Should give it plenty of power to go through 1080p video, play a lot of games, all kinds of those things that you would expect to do on a tablet. Now, the Xoom is actually going to be available on Verizon 3G here in the next few months. Again, we don't have the exact release dates, but it should be out within the next few months or so. It will be available with a Verizon 3G, and you can actually upgrade it a little bit later on in the year to a Verizon 4G, so you can actually go ahead and just update it fairly simply. Now, as far as the price, we don't know about this one either. Some people have said upwards of perhaps $800. I think that might be just a little high. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to believe that. So I'm going to go ahead and just reserve my judgment until they actually announce it. But overall, I'm also very impressed with the Motorola Xoom. Now, lastly, let's talk a little bit about the Apple iPad 2. Now, this is something that, while it's not official like the other two, and I've actually never seen one, as well, nobody's really seen one, but we, myself, as well as a lot of other people, have really been speculating about it, doing research and everything, so hopefully I can give you guys a pretty complete picture of what we should be seeing here around April or so. So the iPad 2 is going to be mostly an incremental upgrade. It's not going to be some revolutionary redesign where it's going to be run OS 10 and have a 35-inch display or anything like that. It's going to be mostly the same, just with some important tweaks. One of the first things is that it likely will have a high resolution display. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and get into what they're going to call it, Retina Display or not Retina Display. It's mostly just kind of, talk. But what I do believe is that it very well will have a much higher resolution display, perhaps somewhere in the range of about 2048 by 1536. Don't quote me on that exactly, but I think that's about the resolution that a lot of people are talking about. So I wouldn't be surprised if it does have a much higher resolution display. It should look really, really nice, although I wouldn't 100% guarantee on that one. Some of the other cool things is that it should be just kind of tweaked as far as the design goes. So it should be a little bit thinner, should be a little bit more tapered on the ends, kind of like the change between the second and third generation iPod Touch to the fourth generation, if you've ever seen one of those. They just kind of just flatten the back and kind of taper it off a little bit, which I definitely think should be cool. It also will have an SD card slot. Now, this is something that I'm really looking forward to, as I do a lot of pictures and video, so it would be really nice to have an iPad with me. So I go film a video, I take some pictures, just pull the SD card right into the iPad, and I'll be good to go. Now, one other thing is that it should have a dual-core processor. So most likely the Apple A5, the A8, the A9, whatever they decide to call it, but a dual-core processor very similar to the other two tablets. Now this one we know a little bit more about and we know a little bit less about. So do keep all this stuff with a little bit of grain of salt, because none of it's 100% confirmed. But what I will tell you is that we will see a new iPad in the next couple months. It should be a pretty good upgrade. Okay, so for the second segment of D3 Live, we will be taking live questions from everyone in the chat. So we have a ton of people in here today, as always with every episode of D3 Live. It's filmed in front of Blog TV. So we'll go ahead and just take some questions from everybody in the chat. What tablet has the best display? That's actually a pretty good question. It's kind of hard to answer. The Playbook has a decent display, but it's not going to be anything spectacular. It's only going to be a 1024 by 768, I believe. But I do know that it's not going to be particularly high resolution. Now, the Motorola Xoom will have a 720p display, which is pretty good. However, if the rumors are true, the iPad is going to have a really, really nice display. So I would probably bet on the iPad, and if it ends up just having the same display, then probably the Xoom. Will I get any of the tablets? I hope so, yeah. I'm not 100% sure. I'm waiting to go ahead and kind of see a little bit more about them, the prices and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I absolutely plan on getting my hands on as many of these tablets as I can. Do I think that Apple has a huge problem with all the new tablets coming out? That's actually, yeah, that's kind of something I was kind of talking a little bit about earlier. Yeah, I do think that they do have a problem. Now, problem is kind of a subjective thing. I don't think that all these tablets are going to make it where people are never going to buy another iPad or anything like that. But last year, that was pretty much the only tablet. I mean, yeah, the Galaxy Tab came out. It did okay, but nowhere near, a big enough rival to the iPad. So last year, Apple just sold as many iPads as they could make, pretty much. This year, I think that there will be more competition. Now, whether that means that, that it's going to really hurt the iPad with all these new tablets or not, that's just going to kind of we'll just have to see about that. But I do think that there, at the very least, will be a lot more competition for Apple this year. What do I think of the multitasking on the Playbook? Is it a WebOS ripoff? Now, I actually, well, that's kind of a hard thing to say. I mean, you can say ripoff and all this kind of stuff, but the major thing is, does it work and does it work well? And both those counts, it works absolutely phenomenally. So the BlackBerry Playbook, if you don't know, runs the Unix operating system. It's kind of custom made for the Playbook. And from what I've seen, it's absolutely excellent. It does run and look quite similar to WebOS. However, that's not a bad thing, because I'm also a big fan of WebOS and the way it multitasks. So, somewhat, yeah, they definitely are fairly similar, but they both work excellently, so I wouldn't really, complain too much. Will Steve Jobs's, what am I trying to say the word? Is Steve Jobs not being here going to hurt the iPad 2? No, I think it's not going to help anything, but the iPad 2 has been pretty much done for, well, before Steve left. And you do keep in mind that he's not gone, technically. He's still the CEO, and he's still going to be involved in all the major decisions. So, while he might not be around for the day-to-day stuff, when they say, hey, Steve, we're going to launch the iPad 2 tomorrow, he's going to say, sure, or no, whatever. So, I think that, yeah, it's going to hurt Apple a little bit in the long run if he doesn't come back. But for the short term, I don't think it will make any difference at all. I think the iPad 2 is done. It's going to be coming out. Everything's already figured out, so I wouldn't worry about that. Which one will have the best price? Again, because we have pretty much zero pricing information about any of the three, it's kind of hard to say. I would expect the iPad 2 to probably remain about the same price as the current iPad. I would think that they're going to do it kind of like the iPhone and make the current iPad go down in price a little bit. But I think the iPad 2 will probably be around $500 in the United States. Now, as far as the Playbook and the Xoom, it's going to kind of depend on the normal price as well as the subsidized. So a lot of tablets, if you go ahead and buy it on a contract with a carrier, you're going to get a pretty substantial discount. So I would guess the Playbook would probably be the cheapest, just because you can get it on Sprint, and I imagine there would be a pretty nice subsidy. So that will probably be the cheapest, but again, it's kind of hard to say right now. BlackBerry is BlackBerry is probably going to be the better price. It seems to be a little bit of a smaller tablet, which isn't a huge deal because it's got a little bit smaller display and everything. It's not it's going to make a big difference. However, since it is smaller and since it will have the Sprint, which I would imagine it will have a subsidy, yeah, I think the Playbook will be probably the cheapest. How will the multitasking work on the Motorola Xoom? That's actually a good question. They have showed off a fair bit of the multitasking not the multitasking, but as far as Android 3.0 Honeycomb. However, I haven't actually seen exactly how it works. Now, I might be totally wrong. They might have already shown that, but I do believe it'll probably be somewhat similar to the way that Android works. But again, I actually did not see the multitasking in action when I had my hands on it, so I really can't say. Do I think the iPad will be thinner? Yeah, I think it will be a bit thinner. I don't think it's going to be, razor thin or anything like that. But I do think that it will be substantially thinner, maybe, a fair bit. I don't think it's going to be a lot thinner, but it should be somewhat thinner. So anyway, guys, that's it for this episode of D3 Live. I'd like to thank you all for watching. Of course, everybody in the chat who's come and, hang out with me. If you're interested in more and you'd like to go ahead and take a look at D3 Live every week, feel free to subscribe to my channel. Like I said, I do this every week, Saturday at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. So if you want to subscribe, you can go ahead, come on by, actually watch the show live, hang out, ask questions. Or, of course, you can just watch the pre-recorded video on YouTube later on. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching.